yet again, so it's not freezing cold. Hello, this is Mark Wildman of Wildman Athletica, and we are doing a live Q&A today. It is December 16th. It's Friday. We normally do this on Thursday. I'm a day behind this week due to family issues. Review real quick. We have our upcoming program should be out on the 23rd. This is the Basis of Strength program. Pardon me. It's the big 7-level heavy club program that can go on for like 5 years. It's a short side and way longer if you want to go longer than that. It's designed for anybody to start with the lightest weight possible and to use every weight up to at least 50 pounds, but it can be pushed further than that up into the 70 pound, 80 pound range. The gear sort of exists for that, but not really quite yet. So right now we're just telling people to push for the 50-pound limit on that, which is already crazy in and of itself. 4 rounds, 8 exercises, 32-minute program. What else do we have coming up? We have Thailand is coming up. Our Thailand 5-day seminar is coming up in the first week of January. February will be London seminar. March is Bellingham, Washington again. April, we don't really have a lot on the schedule for that, but we look like we're going to have something in Austin, Texas at the beginning of May. And then I'll be part of a 7-day Italy Fit giant experience at the end of May in Italy. After that, I don't really remember what's on the schedule. That's about as far out as I can plan. We will be trying to plan some other stuff in the middle there, probably Colorado, and hopefully we can get some Indianapolis stuff going as well. Just trying to start doing seminars all over again. We didn't do any seminars live training for that 2 years, and then we started doing seminars again last year, but it's taken people a while to get back into the idea of going out and doing seminars and doing all that other stuff. So we are just building up, and hopefully next year we can start doing kettlebell seminars and club specific seminars for trainers, for certifications and things like that. We're looking at all the stuff that needs to happen for that. That's a lot of paperwork and all kinds of other things. So we'll probably just be doing seminars in the beginning until we figure out all the paperwork situations. And questions are already rolling in. So we're going to try to limit this today to 90 minutes instead of the normal 2 hours so that we can get some other stuff done on our to-do list today, specifically working on the PDF for the giant program and shooting content. I still have to reshoot one piece out of all the videos for the Basis of Strength program. I managed to mess up the shield cast out of all the things, out of all hundreds of videos. I messed up the shield cast and don't have it. So it's not going to match everything else. I've been trying to find a way to fix it. I do not have the skills nor the computing power to fix it at this time. So, and I don't have the ability to go back out 2,000 miles to the mountains and find that exact same location and shoot it again for 30 seconds or for 1 minute of each thing. Let's get started on questions. KD's always asking questions. Feet question. Excellent. Thank you guys for labeling your questions, topic, question, all that good stuff. That really helps me organize my information faster so that I get answers out to you better and faster. KD, feet question. You previously mentioned using Bosu balls for regaining and improving function of the feet. Can you go any more into detail with that? Any videos in the pipeline regarding the Bosu ball? I used to have 3 Bosu balls in my gym because they're awesome and they're super, once again, they're a high value item. They cost in the $100 to $150 range, depending on where you get them. They are everywhere and they are almost never used to their proper potential. I'm not going to talk a lot about using the Bosu ball, mainly because I think people will kill themselves with the stuff that I want to do. The stuff that I want to do is really based on some circus stuff that I learned, 12 years ago from balancers. I will probably at some point talk about that on the channel. Right now, I don't have a Bosu ball. All of mine are still in storage, along with another $10,000 worth of gear out in California. And I don't know how much I want to talk about that I already talk about a lot of stuff that's already bordering on dangerous if people aren't paying attention. I don't know if the BOSU stuff is a good idea to put out into the world, just because I'm afraid that people are going to biff it, and then somebody's going to say they learned it from me, and then it's going to go poorly or something. I think let's just start with doing our basic clubs and kettlebell stuff. There is a lot of stuff you can do to correct feet. We already talk about tons of it on this channel. A lot of it is single leg, or 2 feet on the ground, swinging weights laterally to cause the arches of the feet to fire. There's tons of stuff, but I'm not going to talk about that right now. It's probably in the pipeline for next year, but not right now. I just don't have the time to talk about that and to make those videos properly. We have a hello from Marquette, Michigan. KD, longevity question. Excellent. Love these labels on how it is being labeled. What specific weapon would you train with to contribute to the best longevity of mind and body? Assume only one, please. What specific weapon would you train with to contribute to the best longevity of mind and body? It would be staff or war club. Let's say staff. Staff is probably is the easiest possible weapon for people to train with. And the staff is historically in every culture a symbol of strength or authority. If you go into the Bible, you will see Moses' staff and the staff of Aaron. The staff is the first thing that I teach. I teach it before punches and kicks. And there's a very specific reason for that, is that humans are designed to hold things. A lot of martial arts are taught. You're supposed to learn all the punches and the kicks and stuff first. I don't think that that's right. I think that humans should learn to use weapons first, and then learn to fight without weapons later. This is very specific to not ring fighting of any type. This is very specific to the concept of actual personal self-defense. And you will find this idea in every Asian martial art that I know of, and in European martial arts, historical European martial arts. Staffs, eyebrow height staffs, are the ones that I tend to start people with. It's the first thing you learn in like Shaolin, the first weapons you learn in Shaolin. I think Wudang is the same. I can't remember. Depends on who's teaching it. But you'll also find it in historical European martial arts, and you find it in all of them. I mean, I watch historical European martial arts stuff on staff all the time. Staff is just a big, long stick. So it's kind of the hardest thing to take away from people, the easiest thing to make, and the thing that you should definitely learn first. You can do tons of stuff with it that's very similar to heavy club swinging. And if you were to practice something like Shaolin, you would practice your staff forms forever. I have a friend, Amina the Warrior, who's a world-class Kung Fu martial artist, a world champion, and her staff is shockingly good, right? She doesn't see the point of doing something like clubs as much because she does the original version of that's specific to violence, which is staff and sword. Yeah, staff, 100%. Staff, when you train staff, if you come to classes, staff Mason Club classes, we teach them all together for a reason, is because the movement patterns are incredibly similar. Think staff is super light and can move in the most directions the fastest. And then mace, medium weight, long length, and then club, medium weight, medium length. When you stack these three things together, I think people learn the basics of what human athleticism is incredibly quickly. And then turning anything like that into a longevity practice is removing the competitive part of it and working on the movements in isolation and perfecting the movements forever. Yeah, so they're slightly different, but definitely if the one weapon for longevity, 100% staff. It's in every culture. It goes on forever. You can never be done with staff. That's the best possible answer. Great questions already. We got 2 great questions already. Darth Cello, question. About to complete the first single arm century of inside circle, outside circle, shield cast. Going straight to pendulum seems a bit quick. So much legs. Any tips between movements to include? No. No, it goes circle, circle, shield cast, pendulum, pendulum. You have to learn. So the thing with circles, the reason we teach them first, and if you are really deconditioned, then we like to use an ADEX club system. And we start with, say, a 3.5, go to a 5, a 6.25, a 7.5, an 8.75, a 10. We would complete all of that because we're trying to restore people's standing structure. Once we get to the 10, then we would go to pendulums. It's 10 pounds. It's lighter than any kettlebell, but there is more rotation in it. This is why we always teach, or this is why I always teach kettlebells and clubs together. Because if you do your absolute basics are your kettlebell swings. And even a light kettlebell is way heavier than a light club is. And then club, so we have inside circle, outside circle, shield cast. We focus on that standing position and we rotate about our vertical axis. And then on the other side, we have the kettlebell swing, which is our endurance hip snap. So we tend to teach those 2 things together, right back and forth with each other. And then there should be plenty of overtraining for the inside and the outside pendulum right away. There really aren't any other exercises in there. The pendulums are actually easier than something like side swings because the pendulums have a pause point where you can demonstrate control, lock out your skeleton. Ooh. Pardon me. Where you can lock out your skeleton and stand all the way up. So there's teaching it theoretically, there's teaching it practically, and then there's teaching all the things together to get the most benefit in the least amount of time. So if you're doing your inside circles, outside circles, and shield cast, there should be some type of squat in your program or a suitcase deadlift or something that should already be working on your hips. And yes, pendulums are a lot of hips. There's no way around it. The world is full of hips. Everything should be a leg exercise. Everything is an ab exercise. And it goes on forever. Your legs should be able to endure pendulums for 10 minutes nonstop eventually. And when you run up and through a volume cycle and then a density cycle, you will get up to the point where you're doing inside and outside pendulums for, 10 minutes each one, getting you into 20 minutes. They're slower. That's kind of the point of pendulums, is that they are not as fast as other types of movement. So you should have time to learn to endure. Got a cough coming on here. We have a hello from Quebec. My letter Kenny's going to come through if I start talking about Quebec. Carbage Man. Question. Chiropractor says my non-dominant rotator cuff is imbalanced. Says shield cast and halos are aggravating it. I'd get a new chiropractor. I think your chiropractor's not smart. Get a lighter club, and your shoulder is supposed to do this. There's absolutely something the shoulder is supposed to do. Absolutely 100%. Anybody who tells you to stop doing something that the human body is absolutely supposed to do, I would be very, very skeptical of that person. If somebody doesn't recognize the benefit of the most important movement in all of human evolution, I would be highly skeptical of that person. Granted, if you're aggravating it, you could be going too heavy. You may need to spend more time at a light weight. The whole point of combining shield cast with inside circles and outside circles is when you do an inside circle, you catch and you rotate across. That is shoulder therapy, exactly. When you do an outside circle, you catch and you rotate to the outside. That is also shoulder therapy. But you also need to be able to extend your joint of your shoulder with rotation, with levers. You may be aggravating it, which means you may need to drop weight or something. But if somebody tells you not to do shield casts, I would be super skeptical of that individual. Super skeptical of anybody who tells you not to do the most important movement that separates humanity from everything else on the planet. Unless, of course, you have some type of horrendous shoulder injury. But even then, I would drop weight and still be working on halos and shield casts forever. There's absolutely, that is the most important series of movements that you can do. You have to find a way to work on it. Your body will be aggravated by doing stuff, especially if you have injuries. Your job is to figure out how to do it better. You can either drop weight, you can change which exercise you're doing, you could drop an exercise for a while and focus on something else, but you can never pitch the most important movements from humanity. You just can't do it. Best way to clean the thread on 8X Club. I just put it in a cloth and roll it and then put some like light motor oil on it or machine grease. I mean, how dirty do they get? What are you doing with them? Yeah, I would lay it on a cloth and roll it. That's how I do it. KD, pretty question. Your main thrust is human movement and efficiency. How do you approach training someone like Chris Pine, one of my ex-clients, who needs to make cosmetic impact with his physique? You train him for human movement and efficiency. For the most part, 99% of training is human movement and efficiency. This is an interesting question because this really gets into talking about film and how to train people for film. So you have kind of two really schools of thought, right? So in the training world, when it comes to movies, you have trainers who try to make people look good, and then you have the stunt team who's trying to make an action movie, right? They are not the same thing, not even a little bit. For the most part, bodybuilding has absolutely nothing to do with doing a same side shoulder roll on top of a table as it breaks. They're not the same thing. A lot of clients that I have gotten from Hollywood have come to me because they are injured from doing physique training and then being put into situations with rapid direction change. A lot of fast stops. If you guys, jerk rigs. Let's talk about jerk rigs. So jerk rig is when they put a big harness on somebody and then they strap a wire to them, and then they use a pull rig, or it could either be pneumatic pull or it could be hand pull, and they pull people really fast. And this goes poorly all the time. I think somebody on Harry Potter 7 was paralyzed forever by being on a pull rig. They get pulled so fast and hard, and they're supposed to hit a breakable wall or something, and it doesn't go right. This happens all the time in the film industry. There are a lot of injuries in the film industry based on sudden stops. Getting hit by cars. I have a friend who's a stuntee. One of my best friends is a stuntee, and she, has to go out and get hit by cars or jump off of a 20-foot building, and they put them on a decelerator rig, but she's supposed to fall through a glass ceiling. Are they doing the decelerator rig right is always the question. Or does she just fall 20 stories and land on a glass building and fall right through it? This goes poorly all the time. Spinal injuries in the film industry are almost as prevalent, probably not quite as prevalent as they are in like military guys. For the most part, the most important thing that I see that you can do with any population, military, film guys, stunties, circus performers, normal people, farmers, martial artists, is train people to control rotation of their body. The more rotation that they have and the more that their body is used to accelerating and decelerating load, the less likely they are to get injured. That being said, most of your training goes towards that stuff. Kettlebells, clubs, just by doing that, or mace, you will solve 90% of the potential problems that people could have on accident. You don't even have to really know what you're doing in order to solve the problem because of the levers and the tools themselves. Then, if you're going to do physique training gets tacked on to the end. And physique training is really not that crazy or difficult. Most people do not actually want to do a lot of physique training because it inhibits an everyman aesthetic. So they want to be able to run fast, turn fast, do the fight scenes, and survive the impacts. But for the most part, they're not Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, who has built a career out of just being massive and huge. If you do want to do that, though, that is not hard. You would set up a 3-day-a-week schedule that goes after your kettlebells, clubs, or maces, and you would do an hour of legs, an hour of chest, and an hour back. And that's so simple to write. You could do it blindfolded. Easy way to do that. Do I want to talk about this? Easy way to do that is to set a timer for 3-minute rounds and do 3-minute rounds and stack 3 exercises inside that. You should be done in about 70 seconds, and you should have just under 2 minutes of break in between, and then that controls your output very effectively. Very simple ideas. You can talk about this stuff all day, but for the most part, the majority of actors out there are not trying to be Hercules. They're trying to play an everyman, right? Think about the best movies you've ever seen, right? Indiana Jones, Harrison Ford, Everyman. They trained a bunch for those movies. He also got a spinal injury on that movie. Captain Kirk, obviously. Most of your characters are not the giant muscle-bound leads. Schwarzenegger was the first guy to really do that and to make that a thing. And then you got guys like Van Damme and all the 90s guys, 80s and 90s guys. But for the most part, you'd still keep your training 90% similar, and you would add 10% on at the end. And then the majority of your athletic training work would need to be put in with the stunt team in order to specifically prepare. So think your general physical preparedness is your kettlebells, your clubs, and your maces. Then you get into, say, your falling practices and your ability to fall in the proper stepping patterns. And then you get into your activity, which is your scene-specific preparedness. And then you got to do it in your costume so that you make sure that when you get in front of the camera, everybody understands the surfaces that they are on, the type of shoes that they are wearing, and what is in the way and where the lights are and all that other stuff. That's kind of the mental emotional preparedness pyramid for training actors. I think I answered that pretty well. I can talk about that stuff all day. I can talk about movie training all day. All day. So to train somebody like an actor, you would do the majority of your training would be your human efficiency and human movement, because if they can't move, they don't look good no matter what. And then you would tack on your pretty training at the end, and you can cycle that through like a leg day, a chest day, and a back day. It just takes more time. Question regarding merch. Discord's +1 hat wants to know when Mark Wildman logo beanies are available in the merch store. I don't know. I kind of forgot about the merch store. I will look. It's just I have so much stuff to do. I need an employee. What I need. I really need an employee. Nerd question. Who is the best James Bond? I mean, you gotta say Connery, right? From Russia with Love, the fight scene in the train car. After that, I like Daniel Craig's Bond just because I love the first one, Casino Royale, with the famous running scene with, what is that, Sebastian Foucault, who does the famous running scene in the front of that. One of the originators of parkour and free running, him and Dave, I'm blanking on David's last name, David Bell. But Sebastian Foucault is the guy who's doing the running scene in that opening scene of Casino Royale. So I love Casino Royale, one of my favorite movies of all time. But I do love how real spy-y From Russia with Love is. I think I'm saying that right. From Russia with Love. It's the Connery one with the fight in the train car. That one's amazing. But you can never quite get over Connery, but they kind of fell apart on Connery there at the end of Connery's time. Thunderball and stuff. Not great. See? Like those nerd questions. Grant Gardner. Grant Gardner is the head of the Discord. What's Grant Gardner have to say? Thank you to KD for gathering up questions. Okay, he's just commenting. Grant Gardner runs the Discord. We have a Discord discussion forum down in the links below most videos. You sign up and you talk about nerd stuff on there. We talk about training. I don't know. Talk about James Bond. Talk about all this stuff. Talk about weapons. All the fun stuff that you can be talking about is probably going to be talked about on the Discord. Stefan, would you recommend volume cycles with 2 moves at one time? That's a non-specific question. You're going to have to be more clear on what you mean 2 moves, because a clean and a press is 2 moves, and you can run a volume cycle with that, no problem. A snatch press is 2 moves. Obviously, you can run a volume cycle with that. You can run a volume cycle with whatever you want to run a volume cycle with, really. Volume cycles are an incredibly powerful tool, and I do not know why absolutely everybody in the training world doesn't talk about them. And I think it's because it actually delivers results very quickly in short order, but then it removes a lot of the need for a lot of excess stuff in training. Just by doing volume cycles, people can get better easily for 5 to 10 years on their own with no additional information. Work capacity question, Coding Monkey. How long would it take to build the work capacity to do your workouts in the morning and martial arts BJJ in the evening, 6 days a week? I don't know. Your work capacity never ends. Your work capacity is never done, ever. Your work capacity is never, ever done. Humans can have a functionally nearly infinite work capacity. If you're going to be doing martial arts at night, then obviously you should be doing the shorter workouts in the morning, and you probably will be able to go up in weight less quickly because you will be more tired from less total recovery. So having more weights is probably better. Most people are not professional athletes, so they don't really have a professional athlete's ability to recover or the recovery tools needed to do that. But absolutely everybody can do it. You can always train twice a day. Train in the morning, right? Put in your hour in the morning as your wake up, which I think absolutely everybody should do. And then train at night, martial arts of some type. If you do that 6 days a week, your 7th day will be you're not doing anything. You're doing it full Sabbath style, and you're not doing anything. You're not cooking, you're not standing up, you are staying down and in bed the entire time. Pardon me. Apparently I've developed a cough. How long would it take to do that? I have no idea what your starting point is. No clue what your starting point is. So that's, once again, a non-specific question that's very hard to answer. If you've been doing martial arts for years, then you could just add my training onto it. If you have been doing my training for years, then it's not that hard to start adding in martial arts a couple of days a week. Getting to 6 days a week of training in the morning and 6 days a week of training at night will be hard on most people because they won't have the proper nutrition to support something like that, and they won't be able to get rest properly, especially if they have a full-time job. That starts to get real dicey. If you're working 8 hours a day, you have an hour before and after work, so that's 10 hours a day. If you added in an hour before that, you're now at 11 hours a day. Then if you spent an hour or two at the gym and in transport, you're at 13, 14 hours a day. You're now at like what professional actors do, but professional actors have the support to pull that off. They have somebody bringing them food. They have, they have as much recovery access to that stuff as they want. If you're going to be training like that hard, you would want to be adding in something like professional massage into the equation, but now you have to account for transport to and from something like professional massage. Some of the really, really good fighters and stuff you used to hear about would train 8 hours a day, and then they would go directly into a 2 hour massage every day so that they could recover properly so they could continue to train that hard. You can do whatever you want. You're going to figure out really quickly if it's too much for you or not. And then how you scale that is entirely up to you. Most people push too hard, too fast, too soon, and they tend to get themselves beat up. The problem with something like martial arts is that it's unregulated effort. If you're doing something like BJJ and you're rolling, for those who don't know, rolling in BJJ is like 5-minute rounds of wrestling where somebody is actively trying to rip your body in half. Whether it's an easy roll or they're rolling hard and really trying to rip you in half, that's all unregulated effort. It's very hard to account for that without knowing anything about the individual or what's going on. You have to know way more about the situation than just how long does it take to adapt to doing that. Say 6 months to a year. Just throw it out there. But you have to have your recovery and you have to have really good food. K Tong X question: does volume cycle programming work for barbell movements? Yes. I love the idea of really building work capacity before increasing intensity, but wasn't sure about programming it with a barbell. So barbells are fascinating because the reason you have volume cycles are there if you cannot change the load. Kettlebells were originally fixed weights. So you had 16, 24, 32K. So you had to you couldn't add weight to the system. So you added volume to the system. Also, kettlebells and clubs work with more precise requirements for movement. The movements are much more involved than they are for something like a barbell back squat. Granted, if you're doing a barbell split snatch or something, that is also super involved. What people need to do is get enough experience to make sure they're getting to the correct biomechanical structure at the correct time. So you can definitely volume cycle barbells. That would mean that your barbell's staying the same weight. And you're working on building your work capacity that way. Totally fine idea. You could do the exact same thing that you do in, say, kettlebell sport, and you could do not split, but normal standing. You could do you could do hang clean to jerk with barbell, and you could set it up and you could do 10-minute cycles. You could treat it just like kettlebell sport. You can treat it just like volume cycles where you could be working on a little bit heavier weights. Yeah, volume cycles work for almost everything. Almost everything. I can't think of something off of the top of my head right now that volume cycles would not work for. Barbell is great because you can micro load it. You can keep your workout time very precise. So you can do a 20-minute barbell workout every day. You could have the first 5 minutes be your warm-up movements where bar, slap on a couple plates, do the movement, slap on a couple plates, do the movement, slap on a couple plates, do the movement. And then you could have 5 sets in 3-minute rounds and have exactly 15 minutes by adding slightly more weight each time and having fractional load. The problem with volume cycles is that they keep taking more and more time over time. Yeah, volume cycles definitely work for barbell, but you will not be changing the weight during the volume cycle. Dale donated some money. Thanks, guys. Nayamin. Question: do you exercise specifically for mobility in terms of foot mobility, toe mobility, shoulder mobility, etc.? Me? No, I'm too lazy. I just don't have time to do 20 minutes of foot mobility every day, although life would probably be better if I did. The problem gets when people spend way too much time focusing on mobility and not enough time focusing on movement or loaded work capacity. And I see this all the time. I was talking to a trainer from Europe, and he said he'd have a really hard time with client retention. And I asked him to lay out for me his hour minute by minute. The first 40 minutes were mobility, and then nobody got any conditioning. You have to pick and choose. You can only do so much mobility a day if you're limited on time. If you are a professional athlete, then do as much mobility as you possibly can. Put it in for an hour every day and make it hyper specific. Your average individual simply does not have that much time. They need to spend 10 minutes on mobility per day, and that's it. I focus on neck and hip mobility because those are the things that I need to focus on the most, because I've been hitting the head a lot, I've fallen down a lot. Those are the things that matter the most to me. For other people, it will be spinal mobility. And would it be great to do more mobility every day? Absolutely. But like 8 to 12 minutes is really what I find that people can realistically accomplish who are not professional athletes. So do I do foot mobility every day? No, I'm not a ballerina. I don't need to do foot mobility every day. I'm not a sprinter. I don't need to do foot mobility every day. I try to make most of my training some type of mobility. Club swinging is a type of mobility. It's the exact mobility you need in order to be generally good at being a human. Mace is generally mobility and coordinated skill combined together. Am I going to do any contortion? Absolutely not. Contortionists are a highly specialized skill and act, and they spend hours on it every day. It could be 3 to 4 hours per day they spend on maintaining or doing that level of mobility. Your average person simply does not have that much time. There are a lot of trainers who advocate for really high levels of mobility like that. You'll hear like, who's the Israeli guy? But he wants everybody to work out for 4 to 8 hours a day, which nobody can do unless they're independently wealthy. So do I focus on mobility for 8 to 12 minutes a day and that's it? I could definitely do more, but I'm not in any type of professional athletics right now. I'm not working on movies right now. I don't have time for that kind of stuff. If I were to get back into movies and be doing stunt stuff, absolutely. You would spend 30 minutes a day just on your rolling mobility. What's the biggest handle diameter you would recommend for a single arm club? I don't know, 2.5 inches, maybe. 2.5 inches is crazy big. It's like that big. Your grip would be insane. That would be the biggest diameter you could probably get away with. Oh, cough starting here. I have to start taking some zinc. Curtis 336, squat mobility. Curtis has a hard time getting into full flat-footed squat without a counterweight. He does lots of mobility work and spends tons of time climbing ladders, etc. Always tight. Any advice? I keep doing it. The question is, how deep do you want your flat-foot squat to be? I can get down to my reasonable depth in flat-footed squat. After 3 leg surgeries, I get down a good 6 inches off the ground. That's the bottom of my flat foot squat. It's not nearly as good as it once was, but it's pretty good. I'm comfortable down there. Do I want to sit down there for 30 minutes? No. I want to be able to get down there without getting hurt, do what I need to do, and get back up. I know people who can squat all the way down, sit down tailbone on the ground, pick their feet up, and then stand all the way back up. That's usually women because they have a lower center of mass. Problem is, we all live in the modern world. We do not sit in traditional seated positions. We don't sit in seiza position like they used to sit in Japan, so we don't have the knee mobility or the hip mobility to pull that off. We don't sit in lotus anywhere in our culture, so we don't have the knee or the hip mobility to pull that off. Usually the minimum amount that we can do is work on our flat foot squat and work on our kettlebell squat, getting down as low as possible. We don't care about tailbone tuck because the weight's really not that heavy. It's not 400 pounds. It's a kettlebell. We do the same thing with clubs, and then we work on deck squats. The hip mobility that we work on a lot is something like pigeon pose and shin box. We have videos on both of those things, and that's what we can get away with in the world in which we live. If we lived in an entirely different time in history, none of us would have these problems. But we do have these problems. So do your training, get as low as you can. You may never get really good at it because we simply don't have the time or the necessity to get that good at things. And then make sure you're doing your extension of the spine, your flexion of the spine, your pigeon pose, and your shin box every day. And what you get is what you're going to get, unless you want to start putting in a lot more work. Most people don't want to put in the work to do something like a SOTS press. That's just not necessary for the majority of the population. Andrew Heminger question: is there a heavy club equivalent to the snatch test or Secret Service snatch test? If not, what do you think that would look like? So, Andrew, there are. So, for people who don't know, snatch test or the Secret Service snatch test, the Secret Service snatch test is the name of a specific 10-minute set that was created by hard stylists with Pavel Tsatsouline way back in the early 2000s. It's a 24K kettlebell, 10 minutes of snatches nonstop. Don't put the weight down. And I can't remember, as many hand changes as you want, didn't matter, just go. The goal was to get people to 200 reps in that amount of time, which is a brutal goal for the majority of the population. The majority of the population, that will kill them. That will kill almost everybody. That will kill 99.99999% of the population of any gym, anything. It is brutal. That was done as a hard style, which meant single hip dip, but you could really do it however you want. It doesn't specify that you couldn't do a double hip dip. Over time, that's been a really strong leader of what people think that they should be able to do. Think about 10 minutes. 10 minutes is about a 1.5 mile run. So that basically simulates a dead sprint for a 1.5 miles, or a pretty good pace for a 1.5 miles. What's that? About a 6:15 pace. If it was a 1.5 miles, 6:30 pace, somewhere in there. It's pretty fast. But it can all be done in a small space with one piece of equipment, and you can train for that forever. That is an adaptation of sport style where they would do 10-minute sets with tons of different weights based on your body weight, and they would do math based on how many reps you did with what weight and what your body weight is, and they would create a ratio of all those things to figure out your overall total strength. It is probably the kettlebell snatch test or the long cycle test is probably the greatest single determiner of individual health in one number that I have ever seen. I mean, it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. Is there a club equivalent of that? Yes, it's doing mills for 10 minutes. And if you wanted to be on that level, it would probably be about a 25-pound club. There used to be a test called the trial by fire. I don't know if anybody does it anymore. It used to be 100 swipes, one club in each hand, 100 mills, 100 left, 100 right, and 50 hammer swings, 50 left, 50 right. And it was supposed to be done in under 15 minutes. It's not quite the same. The heart rate's not nearly as high. It's way harder on your grip, way harder on your grip. But you can take anything like the Secret Service snatch test and you could do 10 minutes of 360s, which would be a really good counterpoint to that, or 10 minutes of mills, or 10 minutes of reverse mills. But nothing quite approaches the sheer horror that is a Secret Service snatch test, because your heart is just ripping out of your chest. Usually minute 6 and 7 are the absolute worst. Minute 1, 2, 3, you're like, oh, it's not so bad. Minute 4, you're like, wait a minute. Minute 5, you're like, okay. Minute 6, you want to die. Minute 7, you really want to throw up. Minute 8, you've only got 3 minutes to go. And then it's downhill psychologically. But is there an equivalent? It would be doing 10 minutes of snatches or 10 minutes of 360s. But nothing's as fast and as heavy as a Secret Service snatch test. Nothing will pull on your heart like that. That's why I always say use kettlebells for kettlebell things and use clubs for club things. Stop trying to make them do what the other one does. They do different things. They are exactly complementary to each other. Mill squat question. On every level, my second training, I have a big increase, 8%. The third training always decreased 4%. Sounds about right. Then it stays the same till the sixth training, plus 2%. Always the same pattern. Any thoughts? Yeah, sounds exactly right. Sounds exactly like what I've been seeing for the last 12 to 15 years. That sounds exactly right. That was a question from Tesla Bot Official. Yeah, normally we see a very specific curve with people, and that curve stays. The longer they do it and the more they go up in weight, the curve doesn't really change. So we can get extremely predictable outcomes from people, which is why I wrote the Mill Squat program. So it's very easy to predict when people will get to certain points with the Mill Squat program for that reason. KD, coaching question. How do you try to build and keep motivation in the people you are training? How do you meet them where they are at physically and mentally? How do you deal with the ebbs and flows? Apparently, I have picked up a cough. So there's 3 questions in there, KD. How do you try to build and keep motivation in the people you are training? Variety of program and explaining to them why things matter. So I'm always talking about the Tetris of training. The Tetris of training is a very specific idea to answers every single one of these questions. How do you keep motivation in people? How do you meet them where they're at, mentally and physically? And how do you deal with the ebbs and flows? You run an ABC program with the Tetris of training. You pick the things. So I have a bunch of programs that I have, and I pick the programs that are going to emphasize the traits that those people want to work on first. It could be, it's almost always starts with swings, and then we try to get people into clean and press, and then mill squat. Absolutely the most important things, because it's going to give people the greatest benefit in the least amount of time. Man. And you cycle. So how do you meet them where they're at? Every one of those programs can meet anybody where they're at. Anyone, because they're all scalable to an insane level. It could be a 30-year-old professional athlete. They can start on the swings program. We just have to spend the first 2 weeks determining where their starting point really is. It could be 80. They're still doing the swings program because we have 4K and 6Ks. We can make the weights really light, and we can start to get people doing that right away. So the scalability of my programs is there for a reason. You could start people with a 10-pound club. You can start them with a 20-pound club. And you can run the mill squat program. Usually we start people lighter because everybody thinks that they're much tougher than they are when it comes to rotation. And then each one of those programs runs on its own schedule. So the ebbs and flows is all part of the psychology of training. You have big A and little a. You could have a heavy swing day and a light swing day. The heavy day has lower numbers, the light day has higher rep numbers. So there's always an ebb and a flow built into everything I do. How do you deal with that psychologically? That's coaching. That is talking to people about why they're doing it, talking to them about, even if they're tired, why things are important to at least work on. There's always an option to make something easier. There's always an option to make something harder. And dealing a lot with the psychology is why I'm so much into the nerd math part, because proving to people that what they're doing is working mathematically is always a good idea, because people feel good, they feel bad, they want to quit, they don't think that they're getting anywhere. And if you can prove to somebody that they're already 120% better than the day that they started, then they will definitely keep coming. So psychologically, it's nerd math and Tetris of training. That's how I deal with coaching wise. And I always have 5 programs in the back. If people just decide they don't want to work on something anymore, I have 5 programs ready to go within 30 seconds that can start them on a whole new path forever. So variety in information, but all of that information still needs to have a specific point and a plan that can last years. Important. Somebody just wants to jump into martial arts all of a sudden, I'll just hand them a staff and we'll just start doing staff training on the clock. We do clean and press. They want to know, oh, they get so tired doing staff. Great, we're going to do clean and press and we're going to do club training to support your martial arts training, and it will get easier over time. Everything I do goes together. Nothing does not go together. And if you're a good coach, everything you do should go together. Let's find another one here. Got some really good questions today. This is a non-specific question. Night Ride. How much more grip does the Wildman 8X series have than the standard 8X set? Standard 8X set is 1 inch. The Wildman is, I think, 1.4. So a lot. What do you mean by more grip? You have to define your terms better. The grip is bigger around because I like the way that I close my hand on a 35 millimeter handle much more than I like it on a 1 inch handle. I do not like 1 inch handles. I never liked 1 inch staffs. I don't like small handled swords. I don't like any of that. I want big meaty grip because I have big fat hands. So it has more grip, it has greater diameter in the 0.4 inches around, which is quite a bit of surface area, if you'd like to do the math on that. Franz Navas, question, are loop bands useful? Everything is useful if you know what you're doing with it. If you don't know what you're doing with it, then everything is not useful. If you don't know how to use a hammer is not useful to you. I don't know what to say about that. I don't talk much about loop bands. I mean, I have some. They're literally right here. I have piles of them everywhere. Do I use them a whole lot? No. Are they cheap? Yes. Can you use them? Oh, yeah. There are some guys I follow on Instagram who kill it with loop bands. I find that those people tend to already have a lot of athletic training. So they already understand how to activate and how to position their skeleton. I try to talk mostly about kettlebells and clubs because by default, they will teach people to line up better. Loop bands do not by default teach you to do anything well. If you just pick up a kettlebell from the ground, put it to your shoulder and lock it out overhead and work on it for 5 years, on accident, you will line up incredibly well and you will get all the muscle you ever wanted. If you just pick up a loop band and do whatever you want with it, will that same effect happen? Absolutely not. Are they useful? Yes. Do they by default teach you to be a better athlete? No. Seed set, footwork, stance question. No, it's always a nice nerdy martial arts question. Shoulder width, staggered, athletic, bow, horse, dragon. What next? Golden rooster on one leg. All right, so these are kung fu terms, kind of. I'm not sure what shoulder width means. Shoulder width. Okay, I assume that's a typo. Footwork stance, shoulder width, standing up, absolutely super important. After that, staggered or athletic stance. That would mean warrior stance, or sometimes called mountain stance in martial arts, warrior stance in yoga, rear leg locked out, front leg bent. You'll see this in every martial art known to man through all of human history. Athletic stance or MMA stance is where that rear leg is bent. I learned it as being called small mountain stance. So one leg forward, one leg back, rear leg is bent instead of rear leg straight. You see that it's the big open MMA stance. What comes after that? Then you would need horse stance, which is 2 feet, feet to shoulder width apart. Then you need dragon stance, which is twisting stance. Then you need single leg stance. So single leg stance, standing on one leg. Those are your basic stances. A stretching stance or a drop stance, depending on what you call it. Yeah, those are the basic stances that you would need. And if you get really good at those, every martial art in all of human history has those stances in it. They just call them different names. Yeah, so you should practice them in some way all the time. But your most important ones are standing up, horse stance, and warrior stance. Wear and tear question from Tesla Bot Official. Old timers in my trade, landscaping, complain about sore joints. I want to become old pain free, doing kettlebells and clubs. Any thoughts? Yeah, do them. You'll be fine. People who work for a living get beat up for a living. People who do physical labor for a living, they tend to compress their body and they tend to never stretch. I know because I was one. I know tons of people who work with their hands and they all end up looking a certain way. Old cowboys are the absolute worst. They are beat up more than anybody because they've been thrown off of horses more, landed on more rocks than anybody else, and they get super jacked up. Their legs stop straightening out, their back gets really round from hitting the ground so many times. Just by doing kettlebells and clubs, you force yourself to stand all the way up. The point of kettlebells and clubs is they will traction most of your upper body joints, your wrist, your shoulder, your elbow, so that you don't get stuck in that flexion. Like you'll see roofer guys who've been swinging hammers for too many years and their arms are kind of stuck in flexion. By practicing your basics of kettlebells and clubs, you will almost by default avoid most of the problems that laborers have, and you will balance out your body. Most laborers are also highly specific to one side of their body. They always nail with one hand. If you're going to be laboring, make sure you're doing dig equal number of holes on both sides of your body. It's annoying, but it is good for you in the long run. And do your kettlebells and clubs and do your stretching every day for 20 minutes, and you'll probably be way better off than almost anybody else. KK, can you teach combat functional strikes of mace drills? Does that mean striking with mace, or does that mean using mace to teach combat empty hand striking? You can do both. So, KK, I'm going to see if I can't clean this question up a little bit. Can you teach combat functional strikes? Does that mean me? Does that mean you want me to teach combat functional strikes with mace? Yes, you absolutely can. I, once again, teach people staff. If somebody comes to me, the first thing that I do is teach them, when they want to learn martial arts, the first thing I do is teach them staff. OODA loop, observe, orient, decide, act drills, where people learn to line up their body and then they learn to strike back and hit as hard as possible to other targets, such as heavy bags on the ground or in the air. And then you can turn that into mace drills as well. Steel mace are heavier than something like a combat mace really would be. Strength training mace is way heavier than an actual functional mace would be. Some of my favorite examples of useful mace, a useful combat mace, are the short maces from North America that predate the tomahawk. The tree knot war clubs. You'll see examples of this in every culture on the planet as well. What are they called in African culture? Think about it's just a stick with a big ball on the end of wood, and you'll see these represented in stone reliefs all throughout the ancient world because it was the primary weapon. You'll see them also tons in South America. And yeah, can you teach stuff with that? Absolutely. I have a new mace on the way, a new like short combat mace from Wildman training. I'm sure I'm saying that name wrong. I just ordered it last night to go with that Fiji War Club that I ordered last year. But yes, can you teach with that? Absolutely. It's very similar to teaching modern tomahawk. And yeah, it starts with defend drills and attack drills. And if you practice mace and club, by default, you will line up better for all striking drills. Something that I used to talk about this a lot. I don't think I talk about this as much now. That inside circle trains you perfectly to do a vertical punch. Inside circle is a cross vertical punch meaning vertical knuckles, and outside circle is a vertical jab, which are very kung fu-y martial arts punches, but they are exactly that way because Shaolin used to use the 18 weapons and maces and clubs for strength work. So why change the way you punch? Why not just do it exactly like you would do it with weapons? I don't know if I answered that question correctly. I can talk about this nerd stuff forever. Veketshian, club arc question. Excellent labeling, guys. Some folks are discussing using the arc for single arm club work to mimic the length of wooden clubs. Okay. What should the starting weight be with a longer lever? Forget the physics equation for this. I forgot the physics equation for this. Do it however you want, guys. The equipment that we have now, I like my spacers on the clubs themselves. Arc is somewhere in between, but I consider arc to be horse cutter, so I don't consider it to be like club. Can you use it like club? Absolutely. As long as you're not going to crush your toe, then that's absolutely fantastic. Where's an arc? There's one. I'm not really sure how to answer this. Yeah, you would just add weight to the arc. As long as you don't crush your toes and you can have a straight arm and a full traction in the elbow, then go for it. I like my club handles with my spacers on them, but that's just me. Everybody has, and I consider arc to be something totally different. Can you use arc just like club? Absolutely, you definitely can with the longer lever. Is there a well-defined series of math about how you would add weight to the system? No, you would just write down, I'm doing it with an arc handle at this weight. Because the length of the lever does change, and that changes the center of momentum. Center of momentum? I'm saying it wrong. It changes the length of the lever and how far away it is. I like to accomplish that task with club. I prefer the spacer version. I don't know how else to say that right now. We're going to have to come back to that at some point and talk about that more in depth. But yeah, we'd have to create a whole chart for that. You guys got me thinking about creating a chart for that. It's killing me. Mando's culture, 500 Turkish get-ups a day, you. I don't know what that's about. That's a weird comment, and I think that that's semi-ridiculous. It's a hilarious idea. How long would it take somebody to do 500 Turkish get-ups a day? It would take all day. let's think. If you're doing a Turkish get up and your average time per rep is 20 seconds, that means you would get 3 in a minute. That means that 100 would take, you would get 3 in a minute. In 10 minutes, you would get, if you were flying, man, that math just doesn't really hold up. You would get 30 or 15 on each side to get to 500. Man. But it's a rate of change because you would get slower over time. 500 Turkish get-ups a day is crazy. It's a crazy idea. Doing Jim Jones guys used to do 100 Turkish get-ups a day, but they just spent an hour doing Turkish get-ups every day, and it just doesn't seem like the best use of time to me. But you can do it. It's definitely a great way to build strength, useful strength. I just somebody putting in like 100. I mean, it could take you easily 5 hours to do 500 Turkish get-ups in a day, which is obviously not super useful. It's useful. It's just I think there's way more efficient ways to do things that aren't just based on being crazy. Mace question, KD. How would you train a deconditioned overweight woman with an aversion to kettlebells clubs, only willing to try light mace 5 to 7 pounds? Past in, out circles and casts. Please assume can't convince to use kettlebell club for now. Then you start with where people are at. If people are only willing to pick up a 5-pound mace, then start a math program with a 5-pound mace. Start a volume cycle. And 5 to 7 pounds is fine. If somebody's extremely deconditioned or overweight, that's perfectly fine. When I start people who are very deconditioned or have very severely limited mobility, now I do it with an arc handle for the shield cast, which is not super heavy. What is it, 5 pounds? And then over time, you can have them work on that. Getting somebody just good at 360s will do massive amounts for their confidence. People who are deconditioned have been hurt for the most part, and they don't want to continue to get hurt. If you are training somebody like that, your job is to make them better without getting them hurt, and to show to them and to explain to them how and why they are getting better every day. Every day. Every day. That is the job of a trainer, is to help people get better and to prove to them that they are getting better. I absolutely hate people who, all the trainers who yell at people or who tell people that they're not being tough enough mentally or whatever. I think all that's bullshit. I absolutely cannot stand trainers who do that. Your job as a trainer is to make people better. If people can start with a 5-pound mace, absolutely fantastic. You should be able to write a 3-month program with that 5-pound mace and have them get better every day until they are psychologically prepared to move up in weight and to do something more. There is always, 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 always a path forward. There is never not a path forward. So if you're dealing with somebody who only wants to use a 5 to 7 pound mace, great. Write a program for it. Make sure that they understand why they are doing it, and then show them how they were better every single day forever. Do you have a kettlebell program similar to the mill squat program? Yeah, there's a intermediate kettlebell program on Strong and Fit. Is it exactly like the mill squat program? No, but it's not far off. Cycle question. Would you recommend, this is from Steven Sanchez. Cycle question. Would you recommend cycle training with kettlebells and mace at the same time? Clean and press, gamma, and snatch 360? Absolutely. Absolutely. I would definitely recommend that. So, Doing clean and press with a kettlebell and gamma cast and doing snatch and 360, absolutely. There's no why would I not recommend that? It's exactly what you should do. You should be doing kettlebells and you should be doing clubs and you should be doing mace. I don't care in what order you really do them. There are some better ways that I have found to do them over time from just years of experience. But if you want to slap programs together, 100%, 100%, go for it. Robert Ashford, swing question. How many swings per set of volume cycle should I aim for if I have an adjustable kettlebell? I wrote an entire program on that, and the answer is about 500 pages long. How many swings per set? All of them. You need to do all of them. I don't. Robert Ashford, I'm not. Did you? You should start at the bottom and get to 20 reps. If you have an adjustable kettlebell, it means you have more steps. It means you're going to get a better overall outcome because you have access to more weights. The point of an adjustable kettlebell is that you have more weights so that you can get more experience, so you can get better in a shorter period of time. And if you're doing a volume cycle, then the volume cycle is written itself. Do I do any dedicated zone 2 training? I don't, but that's just because I don't have time to. I would love to do dedicated zones 2 training. This was a question from Nayameen. My dedicated zone 2 training is picking up a club and not putting it down for 30 minutes. Is it zone 2? I don't know. It's pretty close. Over time, the club will get heavier. My heart rate will get better shape and I'll get better at moving. Zone 2 training, would it be great to go out and ride a bicycle every day for 45 minutes? Absolutely. Do I have time to do that? No. Do I have a fun place to do it? Not really. Doing dedicated zone 2 training is absolutely excellent. The question is, do you have the time to do it? And do you have the ability to keep doing it consistently? For the most part, I don't run anymore because I've had so many knee surgeries. Frankly, I'm afraid that I'm going to run out of tissue inside of my knee by doing something like running. Can I go out and cycle? Absolutely. Do I have a fun place to cycle right now? No, so I'm not doing it. Would it be great to do cardio or do a rowing machine as zone 2 training? Absolutely. My rowing machine is not on this side of the country. I was doing some more what you might think of as dedicated zone 2 training with adjustable kettlebells in half marathon lengths a couple months ago, but I haven't done it since I've been back to Ohio here. I just haven't had time. I've been doing a bunch of other fun stuff instead. So right now what I'm doing in my training is I had an idea and it kind of got thrown out the window because I got that barbell from Bells of Steel. So I'm doing double kettlebells 2 days a week. I'm doing two-handed club 2 days a week. I'm doing that trap barbell for deadlift pattern 2 days a week because I haven't deadlifted in years. And then I'm doing 30 minutes minimum of single arm club training without putting the weight down 6 days a week. Mostly because it's fun. Somebody had asked me a question about a specific pattern in clubs, like a sword flare pattern with clubs. And they asked me what I thought about that. And I said it was great if you have the weights to do it. For the most part, the equipment to train that effectively, and I have a cough apparently. The equipment to train that effectively did not really exist because you had 10-pound clubs and 15-pound clubs, and the jump was way too big for people to survive that complex wrist movement with clubs. Not now with the 8X. So I looked at it and I just started being like, okay, let me actually figure out how to do this. So an 8X handle plus the spacers plus the and I'm just adding 1.25 pounds per week to that. And I'm working on figuring out how to write a program around it. But it will be very specific to something like an 8X club, which can be very, very highly controlled. And I would love to get that program up to, say, a 30-pound club. Which I don't know if it's physically possible, but I'm sure it is. I just have to figure out how to do it. And this is what I'm using for that program now. Wildman handle, super long spacer. That's a 5, a 2.5, a 1.25. So that's, what's that, 7.5, 8.75 plus the 6 pounds. It takes me up to 14.75 on the long lever. And I figure if I add a 1.25 every week and keep doing it, how long is that going to take me? It's going to take me a while to get up towards the 25 or the 30, but it'll be next March or something. But yeah, that is my dedicated zone 2 training right now. If I had other stuff, if I had a ski erg, my ski erg is out at Combate, my rower is out at Combate, my mountain climber is out at Combate. If I had those things, I would do them. Nerd question: what's your favorite DC Marvel comic series? Obviously, Batman. Batman's the best DC character that's ever been written. Nightfall was the best series of Batman that was ever written. Marvel comic series. I'm an X-Men guy. Obviously, I'm an X-Men guy. Wolverine 75, 76, 78. Some of the best comic books ever written. Of course, you have, X-Men 1, X-Men 25. X-Men 25 leads to Wolverine 75. Some of the best storytelling and art ever done. Comics really, really fell apart in the 2000s. I mean, just hideously. From coming from the early 90s comics of X-Men, where the art is absolutely incredible, in the Jim Lee era, but that X-Men in 1991, X-Force, never an X-Factor guy. X-Force, though, definitely super cool. Those are the best comic books I've ever seen. Obviously, Wolverine was probably one of the most interesting and fun comic book series ever done. My favorite Wolverine is probably Hunter in the Darkness. What is that, 30, 31, 32? It's right in there somewhere. And then you have the awesome ones that were in the 60s. Wolverine 65 to 67, I think. Those are the best comic books ever written. Those are the best. Obviously, you like something like The Killing Joke is an amazing book. The DC animated movie really just fell right off the cliff. Not nearly what it should have been. The art style was terrible. The Max was one of the greatest, weirdest, short-lived comic books ever written. Super weird, super interesting, super cool. And I mean, then you had Image, which was the offshoot of the DC and Marvel guys who wanted to push the art even further, but they were just never great story-wise. But yeah, old school comic book questions. Love that. But Nightfall is where Bane breaks Batman's back, and that's a whole series, and it takes like 6 months, and it covers all the Bat books. And it was like incredible. Like, it's like real gothic storytelling that was super duper cool back in the day. We could talk about comic books all day, of course, right? When you grow up, in the middle of nowhere on a horse farm, 10 miles outside of town, right? I used to order comic books. You ordered them every week on the phone, and they would get delivered to your house because the nearest comic book shop was like 30 miles away. And like once a month, I would get to go to the comic book shop when I was a kid, and you would save up all of your money, and you would go in and you would think about it forever, about what was the best storytelling and about what was the coolest stuff out there. But yeah, the X books were amazing. The art in Marvel and DC has just plummeted, and the storytelling is just not great. Batman's the only thing saving DC. It's the only thing been holding up DC for years. And they really kicked the crap out of the X-Men because they weren't making any. They tried to shut X-Men down because they couldn't include it in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So they tried to like kill all the characters and do all kinds of crazy stuff to try to promote the other books. The problem is nobody cares about Ironheart comics. People always liked Generation X and things like that way more. They were much more interesting. I can talk about that stuff all day. I am a nerd. Ben Semish, how are the trap bar experiments going? Awesome. I think that trap bar is going to open up that bells of steel industrial trap hex open-ended bar. I think is brilliant piece of equipment, like a truly brilliant piece of equipment. I don't know why it took everybody so long to get to that point. I think that I'm calling it the Batman squat, can be done with that super well. And the Jefferson curl is perfected with that piece of equipment. So I've been doing Jefferson curl into Batman squat for warm up and then going into the heavy deadlift twice a week. I think it's incredible. I wish that I was going to be close to that thing for some consistent amount of time. I leave here in about 2 weeks to start traveling, and I will be traveling off and on for the first 6 months of 2023. So I'm not going to be able to make progress on that program, but I've been thinking a lot about how do I articulate that program and how do I make it time controlled and how do we make that program work. I can do an 80-pound Jefferson curl blindfolded cold, but I don't think normal people can do that. So I got to figure out a better starting point for that as an idea. But the hex bar experiments are going awesome. That is a badass piece of kit. A badass piece of kit. Oh, people were asking about the bells of steel. The code Wildman works on the dead bounce plates and the hex bar, apparently. I just heard from them right before this live started. So the Wildman code applies to those things, the hex bar and the dead bounce plates. Maybe they'll expand it over time, but I don't know. They're a company. They're going to do whatever they want. But Bells of Steel is a great company thus far. I like the quality of their gear. I just like them. They're nice people to talk to. Which is not how it goes normally. Normally, people in the fitness industry are not fun to talk to. They're not excited about stuff. They're not trying to do interesting things. I think Bells of Steel is trying to do some pretty cool stuff. And hopefully, maybe we can do some seminars with Bells of Steel next year or something. That would be great. Center of mass and pivot points. HEMA folks discussed hours about this while looking at swords, feathers, falchions, staffs, and other striking implements. Good comment. Guys, label comments and stuff so I'm not getting trapped in questions or comments here. Clim Escudero. Escudero. Climb Escudero. Reading names, guys. Sorry. I'm always trying to pronounce them out. I have speech impediments and everything else, so I have to say a lot of things out loud. He has a 50-pound kettlebell and his wife has a 30-pound kettlebell. Is it a good idea to use them at the same time for double kettlebell swings, cleans, presses, as sort of an offset strength movement? For you, Climb, sure, go for it. I would tell you to stick with your single kettlebell work or to do anchored work. I would not do symmetrical movements at the same time for the most part. Your wife, I would probably get her a lighter bell. 30-pound kettlebell is pretty heavy for most ladies to do something like clean and press with for a long time. A lot of ladies will start in the 18 kilogram range, which is 17.6 pounds. Go to 10, which is 22 pounds. Go to 12K, which is 26 or so pounds. 14K is really where you're at in the 30-pound range. That's pretty heavy for most women to start with, mostly psychologically. Can be different populations. If they're CrossFit, 30 pounds is nothing to them. If they are normal people, 30 pounds can be really heavy to try to convince somebody to do Turkish Get Up program with, and they should probably start lighter. Can you put one in each hand and do it? Absolutely. You just have to make sure you're doing an equal number of reps or an equal number of sets with weights on either side of the body. So you don't end up with one super strong side and one less strong side. But yeah, go for it. Peter Osborne, you always have these questions. All right, Peter, I'm going to throw in on this one. Isn't it weird that Batman is a trust fund kid, beats up disabled orphans trying to save the Arctic from climate change? Let's be honest. The Penguin isn't trying to save the Arctic from climate change, guys. The Penguin's a gangster. Poison Ivy, on the other hand, is trying to save the world by growing more plants. That one we can question all day, every day. We can talk about Batman villains all day, Batman's rogue characters. Like, is the Joker actually the bad guy, or is he super sane? Always a real question. Is Batman actually the bad guy in the entire thing? Always a good question. Let's get back on track. Did I answer this one already? Amoretta Robinson, as far as conditioning goes, which one is more beneficial, practicing with Kali sticks or adjustable baton? That's a completely, once again, non-defined question because nobody can tell you. Nobody's telling me how much the Kali sticks weigh, where their center of mass is, or what the adjustable baton is. I would say Kali sticks because they have are more likely to have more mass further out than adjustable batons. I don't know why you're practicing with adjustable batons anyway. It's pretty Dick Grayson of you. It's definitely pretty Matt Murdock of you. But that's kind of a non question. Without any numbers in there, there's no math, there's nothing you can talk about. Sai Chu. Anxiety sleep question. Any ideas on how to reduce, eliminate worrying about getting enough sleep or waking up early? Go to bed early. That's the only thing you can do. Try and be in bed for 9 hours at a time because you're always going to spend at least an hour in bed worrying about something, whether it's family, whether it's health, whether it's the news. So the goal is to try to be in bed scheduled for 9 hours. If you have to be up at 6, then that means you need to be in bed at 9. You should probably be wearing something like blue blocker glasses for that last hour to help your brain start to quiet down, to block blue light from hitting your retinas. And then you need to be lights out by a specific time. The goal is to get 8 hours of sleep a night. That is incredibly difficult in the modern world, but there are some things that can help you do that. Blue blocking glasses really helps. Being in bed an hour before you need to be asleep also helps quite a bit so that your body and your mind have time to quiet down. That's about it. Sleep is the hardest part of the equation for most people. Sideshow, again, Jefferson Curl question. Never really done them before. That's a statement. What are they good for? And what would be a good beginner progression? Jefferson curls are good for everything. So Jefferson curl is a super straight leg deadlift without a straight spine. Your spine can roll in whatever direction it wants to. I love Jefferson curls, and I learned them originally from circus performers. The whole idea that your back has to maintain perfectly flat throughout lifting, I think, is nonsense. Anybody who's ever worked on a farm knows that because you have to pick things up in all types of weird compromised positions. So your spine needs to be strong in all positions. So there are, I think, two types of deadlifts that you should practice, right? The bent leg deadlift, chest up, head up, powering through the hips. And the other one, which is all just posterior train, perfectly straight legs going all the way down so your hands are well below the line of your feet. And this mimics the same movement range of mobility that you would need to do something like a plow stretch, or that you need to be able to do something like shoulder rolls in jujitsu. It's a normal human range of movement. Everybody cold should be able to put their hands dead flat on the ground with perfectly straight legs with no warm up of any way. That is a normal normal human range of movement. And everybody should be able to do that. Jefferson curls help people learn to do that better. You should be able to deadlift with perfectly straight legs in that position. If you lift a lot of odd objects or you've done physical labor for a living, you don't get to get into your perfect barbell stance all the time. In fact, very rarely do you get to do that. You need to be able to do that while rotating, which normal gym people will tell you never to ever do. But you should also do kettlebells and clubs, which they would also tell you not to do. Jefferson curls are a full, normal human range of movement, and everybody should be good at them. And because you should be able to pick things up straight leg, and you should be able to pick up load straight leg. Now that I have this hex bar, I haven't had a chance to work on Jefferson curls in years now. But now that I have this hex bar, I could see pushing a Jefferson curl into body weight or body weight plus easily, which I think is a very realistic, very good goal for everybody on the planet. I think that that's absolutely something that can and should be done, because I think that that will just improve everybody's life. Hamstring mobility, spinal mobility, everything. That's something that I think that people should be able to do all the time. So what are they good for? Absolutely everything. What's a good starting program for them? Plow stretch, forward fold, learn to touch your toes, start with a 1 pound weight and start doing Jefferson curls. 5 sets of 5 every day. Habibi. Habibi, cute. Scoliosis question. Do you think clubs can help with scoliosis the way they help flat feet, bad shoulders, knees? Absolutely. Absolutely. If you start doing club training and you have scoliosis, start with a lightweight, run all the programs. You will fix a large portion of your scoliosis deviation. Or at least I've seen it work a dozen times. I've never seen it not work for scoliosis. Granted, I'm standing there coaching people, but depends on how deviated people are. But there's tons of stuff on this. Functional Patterns talks about this all the time. Functional Patterns is another trainer group, and they do clubs and maces, but they use some very, very, very expensive machines as well, some very expensive cable machines. But yeah, they fix scoliosis all the time. They just have better documentation of it. I never filmed any of my people with that because none of my people would like to be filmed. Back when I was working in Hollywood, nobody wants to be filmed with something like that. But yeah, does it work? 100%. 100%. I can't think of a reason it would not work at all. Great question, Habibi. Great name, Habibi. Here's a classic question. Just a hobby. Classic question from Just a Hobby. Functional arm strength question. Do kettlebell swings and club mills provide enough to build functional arm strength and muscle building? I don't want bulging biceps, but I don't want to look weak. Yes, absolutely. 100%. The thing is, most people want arms, but they don't, like, why not just do the thing where you're holding on to something heavy for X amount of time every day? It's impossible to not get good arms if you do club training. Two-handed club training, single arm club training. With your two-hand club training, build up to 50 pounds. Side effect, you got great arms on accident. You will not have high peak biceps. You will have long peak biceps, right? Like I don't have big peaky biceps because I don't do the isolation drill required for that. But my arms are sizable compared to almost everybody. Even gym guys, just from picking it up. When you're in order, your bicep is on. When you're doing a shield cast, your arm is behind your head. Your tricep is under load. You are under load the entire time for your arms. Build up to 50 pounds with a two-hand program. Build up to 30 pounds with a single arm program. It's impossible not to get arms with that equation. The side effect is you'll get glutes. The side effect is you'll get abs. The side effect is you'll learn to rotate better. The side effect is you'll get cardio. Kettlebells will make your arms longer and leaner because the majority of the time you are in arm traction. At the bottom of your swing, at the bottom of your clean, you are in arm traction. So do a clean and do a press. Clean and press. There's a reason. Oh, kicking my thing here. There's a reason I talk about clean and press all the time, because it is the fundamental movement of bodybuilding. It's the fundamental movement of athletic training. If you do your swing, you do your clean and press, you do your mill squat program, you do single arm clubs in any type, you will end up with good looking arms. It's impossible not to. Literally impossible not to end up with good arms. Excellent question. Thank you. You want better arms? Get to the point where you can single arm a 50. You'll be fine. Trust me. Think about doing bicep curls with a 50-pound dumbbell. Now make it a giant lever. Now do it for 10 minutes. There's no way out. The great thing about kettlebells and clubs is that they are for hard gainers. All you have to do is practice and you will end up with what you want. It's inevitable. It's impossible. Unless, of course, you want to be Mr. Universe and you want to do bodybuilding. But just for athletic training, there's no way out. There's no way you fail with kettlebells and clubs. Sandbag question. 6 months ago, I did an unboxing of Bells of Steel sandbags. Could I do a follow-up video on them? I mean, sure, they're fine. They're awesome. They don't even look like anything has happened to them. I've had some bad sandbags in my life. The sandbag company, God, I can't remember what it was called. They were really big 10 years ago. I bought one of their sandbags and it broke on day one. And I was so pissed I didn't pick up a sandbag for like 4 years afterwards because it cost like $300 at the time. The sandbags that I got from Bells of Steel are awesome. I haven't hurt them at all. They haven't leaked at all. Granted, I have them out in the barn, so I haven't really been checking. I just go out and pick them up, once a day, throw them over my shoulder. I have 100, I have a 150, and I have a 200. They're awesome. The Bells of Steel stuff, man, those guys are coming in on, affordable gear that's very good. Very good. Here's a leading question. Emily Mount. Question. You mentioned a while back that you think Tai Chi is taught badly. I absolutely do. Could you please elaborate on this? I want to start Chen style and would appreciate your input. Many thanks. Tai Chi is a brilliant and amazing martial art that is taught by people who have absolutely no intention of teaching it to you properly. Something like Tai Chi is very, very similar. It's one of the 3 classic internal martial arts. So you have Tai Chi, Chen style being widely regarded as the best style. You have Bagua and you have Jing Yi. And these are described as 3 different analogies for 3 different balls. Tai Chi is like the steel ball, where like laminar flow, things that come at it go all the way around it. Bagua, am I doing this right? Bagua is like a rubber ball, things that come in bounce off of it. Jing Yi is like a wireframe ball, things that come in it get stuck and then get ripped off. Kind of the description of it. I did know an incredible Jing Yi guy who was absolutely horrifying. Never seen anything like it in my life. He was absolutely terrifying. The problem with the movements in Tai Chi is that nobody's telling you the truth. All of those movements are sweeps, throws, grasps, and body strikes, and it's never taught that way. They're teaching you a bunch of movement patterns, and you're just supposed to figure it out. One of the first movements I ever learned in martial arts was from a martial art called Goshin Jutsu. Jujutsu is a Christian jujitsu, apparently. That's what they told me anyway. And there's a movement where you squat down, you arm up, and you come across. You see this movement in the opening movements of Tai Chi. I've never seen a Tai Chi person be able to explain to me what that movement is, but it is stepping behind somebody's leg, dropping your center of mass below them, rotating your upper body, and knocking them over. You can teach Tai Chi. You could teach it to yourself if you had two good training partners and you looked at each individual movement and then you practiced each one of those movements as a throw and as a strike and as a takedown, as a come along, a carry, a takedown, and a strike. Let's say it that way. That's more clear. But it would take you 10 years to figure it out on your own. I've never seen anybody teach Tai Chi properly. Not once, not ever, not even a little bit. I've seen some excellent Tai Chi movers who do competition style forms and they have beautiful snap and movement. I've never seen one of those people apply any of that stuff in OODA loop, observe, orient, decide, act drills. Is it out there? Maybe. Have I seen it? No. Tai Chi is a beautiful, brilliant martial art, but I've never seen it being taught properly. I would go to a class if somebody taught it as OODA loop drills. I would go take it for 10 years. I will take any martial art from anybody who teaches as OODA loop drills. The only people I know that teach as OODA loop drills are MMA guys and Krav Maga guys. That's it. That's it. I've never, unboxing, wrestling. But I've never seen a classic martial art taught as OODA loop. And that's why I stopped doing classic martial arts. But yeah, Tai Chi is brilliant. I've never seen it being done. If you want to see what Tai Chi, those movements really look like, look up like Xiao Jiao, or Beijing style wrestling. And you'll see the exact same movements done in counterpart with actual throws. But Beijing style wrestling is just really weirdly taught as well. Habibi, once again, Habibi, love the name, great stuff. Basic human skills question. What do you recommend as a program for a pure city boy to progress from yuppie to bushcraft extraordinaire? I recommend you do all my programs, probably in order. Swings, clean and press, Turkish get up, mastery, mill squat program, basis of strength, Krav get up 1, bodyweight 101. There's a reason I've organized all these programs the way I have, is because they're all teaching you a very specific series of skills that people need if you wanted to go back to a bushcraft extraordinaire or somebody who could live off grid comfortably. Yeah. The problem with city people is they possess almost no natural movement patterns. Crawling patterns are way out. Climbing patterns are almost non-existent in people. Carrying things, picking things up to shoulder height, swinging axes, none of that stuff is there. All of my programs are very specifically designed to restore people back one step at a time to getting them back to the point where they could live a normal, natural, healthy life, or be Batman. EDC, everyday carry. EDC means everyday carry. EDC nerd question from Stephen K. Do I own any Chris Reeve knives? No, I don't own any Chris Reeve knives. I don't really care for Chris Reeve knives. I think there are a lot of flash and very little substance. So Chris Reeve is a guy who made a lot of very super expensive, very couture knife designs in the 90s and onward, 80s, 90s, 2000s. I've never used one or held one. They're not my type of knife. I talk a lot about knives because knives are a fundamental piece of human civilization and a fundamental tool. Lever, stick, knife are the two most basic tools of human civilization. A lever allows you to lift things, defend, attack, and if you put a knife, an inclined plane on a lever, you get things like axes, you get things like swords, you get things like machetes, you get all types of things. So having a general understanding of the two most basic things that humanity started with is a very good idea. I never liked Chris Reeve's designs much. I never thought that they were eminently practical from a bushcraft standpoint. I never thought they were eminently practical from a martial standpoint. The one that I'm thinking of is that black one with the black handle. I just never liked it much. I never wanted to spend the money on them. They just don't appeal to me. There are lots of other knives out there we can talk about. I can talk about knives all day long. I talk about knives all day long. The best knife ever designed and made was what was it? The Benchmade, was it the 901, the AFCK? Perfection. One of the best knives ever made. Very expensive. And then, of course, my Rat 1 is kind of the successor, the poor man's successor to an AFCK. That knife that I used in a video yesterday, that Gale, whatever, number 2 Spyderco, is $250. That's also a pretty good successor to an AFCK. Different blade shape. AFCK had a lot more aggressive tip. But yeah, we can talk about knives forever, because knives are something that everybody needs every day. We're not going to get to a point in society where we don't need knives. Kitchen knives are just as important today as they were 10,000 years ago, and they will continue to be important all the way up through space travel and colonizing other systems. Anytime humans encounter the natural world or unpredictable situations, knives is the most basic tool that they could have in order to rebuild civilization. Robert Miller. Robert Miller was told that he was deconditioned. He started lifting weights about 4 to 6 months ago, but he's not seeing much difference in cardio conditioning. He just found our channel. What would I recommend? I would recommend you start with the kettlebell swings program. And I recommend you do it for 3 to 4 months, maybe 6 months. And then I recommend you go to a clean and press program. And after 6 months after you start that, I recommend you go to a Turkish get up mastery program. You'll get cardio real fast. The problem with most people when they go to lift weights is they go to the gym, and the gym is based on machines, and they tend not to be picking things up or holding them for long periods of time. Machines tend to take out a lot of the cardio, and they tend to isolate muscles. The body is meant to be integrated, not meant to be broken down into individual pieces. It does not work that way. As much as it sounds like it should work that way, it doesn't. The human system does not operate independently, and movement patterns and swinging weight are the easiest way to add cardio and basic human movement back. You will get cardio. Just start a swing program. Start with a 10-minute program. You'll find out real quick. You'll get cardio real quick. Real quick. Last question here. We're getting over my time here. I got other appointments. Armand Fuladvand. Armand Fuladvand. Nerd question. What kind of books, movies, music, shows do you nerd out on? Also love the old Chevy. Thanks for the content. That old Chevy is great. I'm never getting rid of it. That is a 1986 military K5 diesel Blazer. You know, I would prefer 4 doors, the Suburban version, but I could never have that when I lived in Los Angeles because you couldn't park it. The K5 was the biggest that I could park in Los Angeles and get away with. And the thing is indestructible. It'll run on almost anything. It's fantastic. It needs work. It's cold and it's loud. It's not comfortable in any way. It's kind of like riding a motorcycle all the time, but it is badass. What kind of books do I like? I like fantasy and science fiction. I've been reading science fiction my entire life because science fiction is a lot of the ideas that people will eventually make come to pass, right? I'm talking to you right now on a magical piece of glass that talks to outer space that was first theorized in 1991, I think, in Star Trek The Next Generation, where we first saw data pads. They were just carrying around pieces of glass in the show and rubbing their hands across them. But that idea led to the first iPod. Digitizing of music also came from Star Trek The Next Generation, an episode where Data is listening to all of human music all at once on digital files, and it just sounds like screaming noise, but his brain can figure it out. And nobody thought the music could be digitized, but it can be. And somebody saw that episode and said, hey, could we actually digitize music? And they created digitized music. And then they created a device to put it in. And then the flip phones are from Star Trek, the original series, the idea of the communicator. And then the phones that we use now are all based on science fiction. So science fiction is something I think you should definitely read because they tell you about the way people think the world will work in the future. And now reading old science fiction tells you about how the world has diverged from what people thought. There's a famous short story called Incommunicado. Is it Incommunicado? Written before the digital age, when it's about people living on the moon and the computer systems make specific chirps and tweets when they enact certain systems. And over time, humans stop speaking human language and they stop understanding English and they only speak in the sounds that the computers make. Fantastic story. Of course, you have Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. All of Philip K. Dick's work has been hyper influential in the modern world, and that guy saw further into the future than anybody. Something like Starship Troopers is one of the most influential books of all time, and Stranger in a Strange Land is incredibly influential. It on accident created the 1960s. that author was never happy about that. Never happy about that. Absolutely not happy that he created the 1960s on accident. You have all the classics, right? That's the stuff that I love to read. TVs and movies, I love everything. I was a huge Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan back in the day. Huge Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan. Season 5, so good. Season 4, not great. Season 2, okay. Best quips. They invented the art of the quip, and Buffy the Vampire Slayer really brought in the idea of a season-long series 4 into the mainstream of storytelling, which now we know everything does. Every show now has a seasonal idea and a big bad. The idea of big bad comes from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I loved Supernatural, or at least the first 9-10 seasons of it. It got pretty not great after that for the last 4 seasons. But the opening episode of Supernatural, brilliant. Some of the best, low budget, nerdy stuff is hidden inside of something like Supernatural. What other TV shows? Oh, I mean, obviously Firefly. Firefly is the reason we got Battlestar Galactica. Battlestar Galactica was insane. What a fantastic piece of TV. Some of the best stuff ever done. Movies wise, obviously Lord of the Rings. Huge Star Wars nerd. But mostly the expanded universe, the books, starting with Vector Prime, are amazing. And the new Jedi Order series that Disney completely threw out and completely destroyed. And bastardized in every possible way, taking good stories and just murdering them. And something that Disney can never be forgiven for is the destruction of Star Wars canon. Yeah, that was a good nerd question. I can talk about that stuff all day too. Yeah, we can talk about books or movies or music forever. And we can talk about the implications of them, the history of them, why they're important, all that good stuff. Last question. Creaky Gate. Great name. It's almost as good as Cellar Door. If you got that, you're on it. Gonna play any good modern board games over the festive period? No. I have no time for that. If I had time, I would read a book. I'd never have time for that anymore. I haven't had time for any of that fun stuff in, it's got to be 12 years now. My main goal in life is to get to the point where I could actually get back to doing stuff like that. Ryan, I don't know what your question was, buddy. Ryan, what's your question? Let's do one more because Ryan says I'm avoiding his question. Ryan Kahela. Question: what one or two hand club exercise would you recommend to replace kettlebell swing, squat, Turkish get up, and clean and press? You can't replace them. They're not the same thing. One's circles, one's curvilinear. You don't get to replace kettlebell swings, kettlebell squats, Turkish get ups, or clean and press with club exercises. You get to learn a new series. You don't get to replace anything. They're not the same thing. You cannot make clubs do kettlebell stuff. You cannot make kettlebells do club stuff. They're not the same thing. You need to do both. Both. You have to do both. Just do both. Why not just do both? There's no reason not to do both. There's absolutely no reason at all not to do both. And somebody got my Donnie Darko joke. There we go, Creaky Gate. All right, guys, thank you very much for coming in today and talking to me. Nerd questions, always love them. Training questions, we all get better the more we talk and the more we learn. We get to understand, analyze, and clarify our way of thinking with everything, like our final question there from Ryan. You don't get to make kettlebells clubs. You don't get to make clubs kettlebells. They do their own things. That is an important distinction that people need to try to realize. And I would avoid talking to or listening to people who think that you can do that. Because for the most part, that's something I call the beautiful lie, where people are trying to convince you because they're trying to sell you something. And I would just avoid that. Just do what each thing does better. Can you do deadlifts with kettlebells? Yes. Is a hex bar better at it? Absolutely. The question is, what equipment do you have and how much time do you have? And then you write your programs around that idea. If you can get better equipment, get better equipment. Money spent on equipment is very rarely wasted if it's good equipment. Granted, there's some terrible equipment out there. So thank you everybody for stopping by for the live, and thank you for the questions, and we will come back and do this again in the future.